What would happen if a powerful man dared to humiliate a female passenger, unaware that she was the CEO behind an entire tech empire? That morning, Camille Rivers boarded a flight from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., with the poise of a woman fully prepared for the most important speech of her year. As the CEO of Rivertech Global, a leading tech conglomerate, she had spent months getting ready for the National Business Summit, where she was invited to open the event as the keynote speaker. First class was calm, bathed in the soft glow of recessed LED lighting that accentuated the elegance of the space. Camille's carry glided smoothly along the aisle, her demeanor composed, dressed in a refined cream-colored coat, her hair in a high bun, radiating quiet authority. No one could have imagined that within minutes the entire atmosphere of the cabin would shift, and Camille would find herself at the center of a story even she couldn't have predicted. As she paused in front of seat 2A, the seat she had reserved 3 weeks earlier, a white man in his early 40s was lounging comfortably, legs crossed, swirling a glass of wine in his hand. Without even looking up, he smirked and said coldly, "Miss, I think your seat's in the back." Camille tilted her head slightly, her voice soft yet firm. "I believe this is my seat." The man, Ethan Cross, finally looked up, eyeing her with a mix of disdain and confusion, as if what had just happened was some kind of joke. He waved his hand dismissively, as if brushing away smoke, signaling her to move along without even bothering to check. The air in first class suddenly felt heavier. A few passengers looked up. Flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances. But Camille didn't step back, and she didn't frown. She simply stood there, silent, her gaze steady. Not to provoke, but to remind someone that politeness does not equate to weakness. An older woman nearby gently touched her husband's shoulder and whispered something with concern. A young flight attendant standing closest took a hesitant step back, her hands trembling slightly, unsure how to intervene. In that moment, Camille understood she wasn't just reclaiming a seat. She was standing on the edge of a test of dignity and bias in a space where every glance was quietly measuring her worth, not by her achievements but by the color of her skin. Camille didn't respond with anger or argument. This wasn't the first time she had faced situations like this. But what made this moment different was the look in everyone's eyes. No one spoke up. No one objected. Only brief glances followed by bowed heads, as if that injustice was something to be silently accepted. Camille knew that if she allowed herself to be pulled into that insult, she would become defined by the rage someone else had carefully prepared for her. Maintaining her composed expression, she slipped a hand into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. No one could quite hear what she said, but her voice was as soft as a breeze and as steady as steel. "Lena, I'm on the 9:45 flight to D.C., Royal Meridian. My seat has been taken, and the person refuses to move. I don't want to make a scene, but please handle it immediately. Thank you." That was it. She ended the call and placed her phone back into her pocket. A middle-aged man across the aisle shifted in his seat closer to his wife and muttered, "Looks like things are about to get messy." His wife nodded slightly, her eyes filled with hesitation, caught between the urge to speak up and the comfort of staying quiet. But like so many others, they chose silence. In a moment full of contradictions, a sharply dressed executive in row 3, with a gleaming gold watch, stepped forward, leaned in, and whispered to Camille, "I don't know what's going on, but if you're willing to switch to economy, I could arrange a complimentary lounge for you after we land." Camille turned toward him, her gaze not angry, but as if it passed straight through the crisp shirt and polished exterior, then replied gently, "Thank you, but I'll be sitting in the seat I paid for." The man paused for a few seconds, then stepped back, his eyes searching for somewhere else to land. Meanwhile, Ethan Cross remained seated, legs still crossed, his wine glass tilted ever so slightly in a posture of defiance. Whether he didn't know or simply didn't care, he failed to realize that at least 2 passengers were recording his every move. They didn't intervene, but they documented, maybe out of outrage, maybe out of curiosity. But Camille knew this moment, if handled properly, wouldn't remain just a personal incident. It would become a symbol, and she was ready. The air in first class now felt like a sheet of thin ice, ready to shatter with the slightest sound. Ethan Cross remained seated in 2A, legs crossed to one side, casually swirling his wine glass as if attending a private gala. Each time the liquid touched the rim with a delicate chime, the crisp sound echoed like a provocation, tightening the already tense stares around him. Camille still stood motionless, silent, composed, like a statue carved from sheer will. And it was that very calm that made the man in front of her feel more challenged than ever. A young woman seated a row behind, her wide brown eyes filled with disbelief, held her phone steady, still recording. Within her frame, she accidentally captured Ethan's smug smirk as he muttered just loud enough for nearby ears, "There really should be a separate section for people like her." That clip, only a few seconds long, was immediately uploaded to a private group on social media with the caption, "Witnessed blatant prejudice. What will the airline do?" Camille didn't react. She didn't glance at the screen, didn't acknowledge the whispers. The only thing she held tightly was complete control, not out of weakness, but because she understood that anger might make you stand out for a moment, but dignity is what makes you remembered. Ethan, on the other hand, grew increasingly self-satisfied. He pulled out his own phone, making a call with a voice louder than necessary. "I'm in 2A as usual. There's a minor situation here. If needed, have someone take care of it." The murmurs among the other passengers grew louder. Some shook their heads in quiet frustration. Others looked away, avoiding eye contact. A few discreetly took photos, not to intervene, but to have evidence, just in case. In the entire cabin, there was only one person whose eyes remained calm, Camille. And it was that stillness, standing in stark contrast to the clinking glass and arrogant words of Ethan, that held everyone's attention. No one knew what would happen next. But it was clear this was no longer a dispute over a seat. This was a test between pride and truth. And the woman standing there, silent as stone, was preparing to rewrite the ending. As the wine glass clinked against its rim for the 10th time, its sound echoing through the cabin like a brazen assertion of privilege, the cockpit door swung open. Everyone seemed to hold their breath. A tall man stepped out with commanding presence and eyes as sharp as glass. Captain Darius Cole. His uniform was flawlessly pressed, the 3 golden stripes on his shoulder gleaming with authority. His steps were steady, like the heartbeat of the aircraft itself. Without a word of introduction, Without a single unnecessary gesture, he cast a brief glance at Camille. A glance short but filled with recognition, then stopped directly in front of Ethan. His voice rang out. Deep, firm, not loud, yet powerful enough to shatter the silence. "Sir, please present your ticket and confirm your assigned seat." Ethan raised his eyebrows, his surprise quickly turning into annoyance. He responded with a scoffing laugh. "Do you even know who you're speaking to? I'm a Platinum member. I fly this route every week. This is my seat." Darius didn't move. His gaze remained steady, his tone unshaken. "We are requesting verification for the safety and order of the flight. No one is exempt." Each word locked into place, like the bolts of justice being sealed. First class went completely silent. A few passengers looked down, as if only now realizing the true weight of the moment. A woman seated nearby gripped her husband's hand and whispered, "I've never seen a pilot come out for something like this before." Ethan growled, "You're asking me to leave? For her?" His eyes bore into Camille with defiance, as if her mere presence was an affront to the title he clung to. Darius, calm as ever, leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking you to cooperate because you're in the wrong seat, and if you refuse, I will have no choice but to escalate further." Bung. In Camille's eyes, there was a flicker of gratitude, not because someone had taken her side, but because the truth was being upheld without the need for defense. It was the moment when every eye in first class had to choose: stand with the sound of a wine glass or with the quiet dignity standing still before them. And they knew this would not end with a simple apology. This had gone beyond a seat. This was a choice between dignity and entitlement. Ethan Cross sat motionless in seat 2A, his eyes tense beneath Camille's unwavering presence, though his expression still clung to defiance. The air in first class grew thick as Captain Darius Cole stood across from him, his voice low but carrying undeniable weight. "Sir, I must insist that you present your ticket." Ethan scoffed, folded his arms, and spoke loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Who is she that I should give up my seat? I'm a Platinum member. I fly this route every week." As the words left his mouth, a young passenger, a woman in a light grey suit with her hair neatly tied up, stood from the row behind Camille. Her voice trembled but was firm. "I know who she is. That's Camille Rivers. She's the CEO of River Tech Global." The entire cabin fell into sudden silence. Not the silence of fear, but of realization, as if everyone had just been jolted awake to something they should have known all along. An older gentleman by the window lifted his glasses, looked at Camille, and nodded with quiet respect. No one dared see her as just another passenger anymore. Captain Darius nodded in affirmation, then continued with a calm that cut deeper than anger. "Ms. Camille Rivers is one of this airline's most significant strategic partners. Your refusal to relinquish the seat is not only a violation of safety protocol, but also a show of disrespect toward a valued client." Ethan froze. Every trace of arrogance on his face vanished in a single breath. His eyes darted around the cabin, searching for an escape, but every gaze that met his had turned cold and judgmental. He stammered, trying to say something, but it was already too late. Camille remained still, showing no reaction to his humiliation, no trace of triumph. And that silence, dignified, poised, only made Ethan feel smaller than ever. In that moment, There was only one person in first class who truly commanded respect. Not because of power, but because of her composure in the middle of the storm. Ethan's confusion quickly turned into rage. His face flushed red. His hands clenched tightly around the armrests, as if trying to hold on to the last scraps of authority. Even after being exposed, he still forced his voice to rise. "I'm not leaving because of some performance. She's playing the race and gender card to demand special treatment. I'm not giving up my seat for someone like her." The words rang out dry and hollow, stripped of the arrogant confidence they once carried. The air in the cabin grew so heavy, no one moved. A few passengers turned away, unable to face what was unfolding, but none stood in his defense. 2 security officers, previously signaled by the captain, approached from the rear of the cabin. They didn't have to speak or force anything. Their firm gaze and steady steps were enough to make Ethan realize that control had fully slipped from his grasp. One of the officers leaned in and spoke softly but firmly. "Sir, if you do not leave voluntarily, we will be forced to take further action." Ethan shot up, slamming the armrest with such force it shook the seat in front. Startled, passengers flinched. He bent down to yank his suitcase from under the seat with a harsh motion, then glanced at Camille one last time, his voice low and bitter. "You think you've won? This will all pass. Someone like you can't hold that position for long." Camille did not reply. She remained seated, hands gently folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the window as if his words had never existed. As Ethan walked past, he kept his head down, avoiding every eye. No one spoke, but all eyes followed him. That silence, this time, was not born of apathy. It was a silence of judgment. The cabin door clicked shut behind him with a soft, final thud, like the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. Camille took a deep breath, adjusted her seatbelt, and sat up straight. No announcement was needed. No applause. She had reclaimed her seat, but more importantly, she had reclaimed the dignity that others had tried to strip away. Barely 30 minutes after the flight had taken off, social media platforms erupted in a storm. A 1-minute video posted by an anonymous account captured the entire scene. Ethan Cross loudly insulting Camille, refusing to vacate the seat, and ultimately being escorted off the plane by 2 security officers. There was no voiceover, no special effects, just raw footage and unfiltered sound, but it was that very authenticity that made the clip go viral. Under the soft lighting of the first-class cabin, the image of Camille sitting still, her calm face contrasting sharply with Ethan's flustered rage, created a striking visual that viewers couldn't look away from. Within just 2 hours, the hashtag #RespectCamille shot to #1 on Twitter in the United States, then quickly spread to Facebook, Instagram, and even LinkedIn, where business leaders began weighing in. People wanted to know who was Camille Rivers, and they soon uncovered an impressive profile. The first black female CEO to lead a global tech corporation, the founder of the Future She Scholarship for young women in engineering. A keynote speaker once invited to the World Economic Forum. In contrast, Ethan Cross was soon exposed for a trail of past discriminatory remarks, along with photos from lavish events where he had openly belittled service staff. Leaked internal emails revealed his history of ignoring female employees' complaints about workplace disrespect. In less than a day, his public image unraveled, from that of a successful businessman to a symbol of arrogance and blind entitlement. Camille, despite being at the center of this media whirlwind, remained silent. She declined television appearances and turned down all interview requests from major news outlets. A reporter from The Times emailed her with a simple question: "Why won't you speak out?" Camille replied just as simply, "I don't need to retell a story the world has already seen. I want people to remember the action, not the words." And it was that silence, once again, that made her stand out more powerfully than any voice ever could. That evening, as the video continued to spread at lightning speed, Royal Meridian Airlines could no longer remain silent. Just hours after the flight landed in Washington, D.C., an official statement appeared across all of the airline's media channels, personally signed by CEO Richard Kwan. In the brief but powerful message, the company expressed deep regret over passenger Camille Rivers' experience, firmly stating that discriminatory behavior was absolutely unacceptable under any circumstance, and announced the immediate suspension of Ethan Cross's Platinum membership, along with a 1-year ban from flying on any Royal Meridian flight. It was an unprecedented move in the airline's history, and a clear sign that the public outcry had reached the highest levels of leadership. But Richard Kwan did not stop at an apology. In a private phone call with Camille later that evening, he spoke with a tone that was both direct and sincere. "I've watched the video at least 10 times, he said, his voice steady and low. "And every time, I feel ashamed of what took place under the name of a service I am responsible for. But I don't want to stop at saying I'm sorry. I want to invite you to join our Reform Advisory Board to help directly shape the rebuilding of our ethical standards across the system." Camille was silent for a few seconds, not out of hesitation, but because she was weighing whether this was a real opportunity to create change, or just another performative response. At last, she replied slowly, "I'm not interested in being a symbolic figure or a token. If I accept, I need to see real action. Not just correction, but change from the root." Richard responded immediately, without pretense. "You will be free to propose the entire framework of reform. We don't need a face, you see. We need someone to lead the way." That night, Camille did not post anything on social media. She did not respond to messages of praise or congratulations. She simply wrote one short sentence in her personal notebook. "This is not the peak, it is the starting point." Although Camille declined every interview request and stayed far from the spotlight, her image continued to appear across national news and editorial features. What was remarkable was that people did not speak of her as a victim of discrimination, but as a living symbol of composure and courage in a chaotic era. Thousands of people, most of them women of color, began writing to her, not to offer comfort, but to share. A second-year law student wrote that because of Camille's image, she finally had the courage to challenge a professor who dismissed her because of her skin color. A dermatologist of African descent sent an email describing how patients constantly mistook her for a janitor, even though her name badge was clearly pinned to her white coat. These stories, though different in circumstance, all carried the same message. Thank you for making us feel less alone. Camille did not respond to them all, but she read every word. Each letter was printed, marked, and stored in a dedicated folder. Not for nostalgia, but to listen. For her, This was no longer a personal matter. It had become a social responsibility. She did not want to become the face of any movement, but she understood that she now carried a voice capable of inspiring thousands of others. Still, Camille remained cautious. She turned down commercial campaigns and offers to lend her name to products or events. "I am not a symbol to be exploited," she told her assistant Lena. "I'm a real person, with real limits, but I can do real things." In an internal address at River Tech, she spoke publicly for the first time to the entire company about the incident. Not to retell it, but to affirm something deeper. We cannot fix the whole world in a single day, but we can begin right where we stand, with every word, every decision, every glance. Respect is not a slogan, it is a way of life. The entire room stood and applauded, not because she was the CEO, but because they saw a piece of themselves in her unwavering resolve. A few weeks after the media frenzy had quieted, Camille Rivers found herself once again on a commercial flight like any other passenger. This time, she didn't sit in her usual seat 2A, but chose one by the window near the back of first class, away from any attention. As passengers boarded one by one, Camille was reading when she instinctively looked up. At the front of the aisle stood a young black girl, around 8 years old, tightly gripping her mother's hand, her wide eyes scanning the cabin with hesitation. The soft blue dress she wore was slightly wrinkled at the knees, a quiet sign she had likely waited a long time at the gate. Camille recognized the worry in the girl's eyes, that familiar look she herself once carried when stepping into spaces that the world had silently decided were not meant for her. In that moment, Camille offered a gentle smile, her gaze meeting the girl's. It wasn't flashy, wasn't forceful, just a quiet message. "You belong here." The girl paused, locking eyes with Camille, and suddenly her face lit up. She turned to her mother and whispered something. The mother bent down to reply softly, and together they moved forward, their steps noticeably steadier. There was no need for explanation. Camille knew that the simple smile had just broken an invisible barrier, not between people, but between society's narrow expectations and a child's boundless potential. Camille leaned her head gently against the seat, eyes still following the girl until she and her mother found their seats. A strange emotion welled up inside her, not pride for having done something grand, but relief in realizing that every wound, every quiet or public battle she had endured, carried meaning. She didn't know the little girl's name, and she didn't need to. What mattered was that, in that fleeting moment, beneath a calm sky, and inside a quiet cabin, a seed of belief had been planted. And sometimes one look of affirmation can unlock a door that 100 speeches never could. Camille's silence was not just a response to injustice. It was the strategy of someone who deeply understands the true value lies in action, not in words. In a society where power is often mistaken for privilege, she reminded us that dignity, when upheld, can dismantle even the deepest prejudice. If you believe that respect is not a luxury, but something we all deserve, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss stories that inspire just like this one. And don't forget to leave a comment with the words, "Simply deserved." So together, we can continue to spread the true meaning of justice and rightful pride.